Thank you. I'm going to be talking, the title for tonight, I didn't put the slide up. There's one slide back there, but we don't. Anyways, it's called Minefields tonight. So I don't know if anybody's taking notes or not. There's not going to be any slides because we don't have anybody doing slides. So there's no slides, but either keep track, write it down, or just use your memory if you can. So tonight I want to talk about something titled Minefields, but it's really about relationships. Okay, I want to talk about relationships tonight. I don't think we've talked about relationships from the pulpit here for a while, so I thought it would be a good topic to bring up. Now, I'm just going to jump right into it. I don't have anybody putting up Bible verses either tonight, but I'm not going to really be using Bible verse and chapter as much as I am going to be just referencing the stories of Christ, okay? So maybe if you want to go back and do some homework later and find it, you can. But I want to kind of let it flow a little bit more, just kind of shoot from the hip a little bit. But anyways, so there is a common thread amongst relationships that go wrong, okay? Relationship disasters, relationship dysfunctions. Oh, thank you. And I want to call them tonight. I want to talk about it tonight like you're walking through a minefield. Do you ever feel like you're in a relationship that's like a minefield? Did you ever date when you were in high school? Yeah. Did you ever have a teenager? That's not a minefield. The ground just blows up, right? But the dirt is explosive. But you've been in those situations, or even those some days, right, where a relationship, trying to navigate through one feels like a minefield. It feels like, you know, if you step in the wrong spot, you can't see it, you don't know, but suddenly, you know, boom, and you're like, uh-oh, now we're in trouble, right? It's the, don't you care about my feelings moment, where it's like, uh-oh, I didn't even know I was doing anything wrong. Men can relate to that one. Why did you do that? I shouldn't tell my wife, but that's the one I get all the time. Why would you do that? Well, see, at the information I had at the time was indicate, yeah. So, why are you late? Right? Because being late says my time is more important than you are, right? Right? Why are you being mean? Why are you doing this? What did you do that for? Why? We know these questions where it's like you stepped on a mine and now you're that's what I want to kind of help us track through tonight. Now, this was part of a series, but I'm not going to obviously do a series in a single night. So I'm going to give you kind of the crash course of what this was all about, and give you the ways to navigate through a relationship. It's good to be reminded. I know a lot of us have been in many relationships. Some of you guys have been married for a long time. I'm going to keep walking around. I'm going to drive Steve crazy. I'm just going to stand right here. Sorry, Steve. All right. But relationships, like I said, we want to be able to navigate them without blowing stuff up, blowing ourselves up, right? And I want to kind of give you a visual for that right now and ask you this question, okay? A diet, okay, is what you habitually eat. Animals have a diet, right? There's carnivores, herbivores, et cetera, omnivores, and people have a diet. Now, when you think of somebody that is genuinely unhealthy, you think of their diet. Okay, that's what we think of in America. We think McDonald's, okay? Right? We just think McDonald's. I mean, I always think, because I don't like McDonald's, but that's me. But some people love McDonald's, they swear by it. But I'm like, give me Chick-fil-A, we'll talk about that. But because that's the Lord's restaurant. That's why they have a Sabbath. Anyways, so, but we think of a diet, and then we think of a diet of a healthy person, some health nut, right? We think of their diet. And you compare the two diets, and you're like, well, what they're eating, what they're partaking of, is giving us the results that we see, right? Our weightlifter is literally just eating jars of peanut butter and protein and this and that and the other thing, right? To bulk up. So their diet dictates kind of the results of what they have. When we think of an unhealthy relationship, though, we should also think of a diet, okay? A diet of values. What values do they have? Because the dysfunctional relationship is simple. I'm not going to walk over here. Sorry. I'm going to stand right here. Unhealthy relationship is partaking of a diet of values that are causing this outcome. Just like a healthy relationship, there's a diet of values that it's partaking of, okay? Some of the healthiest relationships, you don't always see the cogs at work within them. You don't see the good days, the bad days, and how they're navigated through, and how people surrender themselves and are selfless and are forgiving, and you know what I'm talking about. Those things, we don't always see them in action, but we can assume that they're there because of what we see on the outside. So I want to talk about, there's 4 C's tonight that we're going to talk about. I got them all have the same letter. Look at that. And I want to talk about them because there are 4 things that are absolutely imperative to have a healthy relationship, and for something for us to keep in mind. So when you think about relationships in your life, relationships, and we're not obviously just talking about romantic relationships, but they do apply. But even children, parents, even friends, coworkers, even, just extended family members sometimes. So these are the 4 C's that I want to talk about. These will help all of us navigate through relationships better and avoid mines, okay? So that's kind of what we're talking about tonight. That's the gist of it. So that's where we're going tonight, all right? but anyways, so the first word I want to focus on tonight, and oh, by the way, before we get into these, all of these can be attributed to Christ, okay? We are Christian. It's amazing. One of the things I find with Christ is you go extra Bible, out of the Bible, and you start looking at stuff, and you start learning truths, and you're like, wait a second, that's Jesus. But I'm not even, I'm in biology books, and it's like, wait, that's what Jesus, that's what Jesus said. It's almost as if he is the truth. But I digress. All right, so the first C that we're going to talk about tonight is consideration. The first imperative component of a healthy relationship is consideration. Okay, and these aren't necessarily in any particular order. And in fact, I would argue in certain relationships, some are more important than others at the time. Okay, so consideration. Consideration is thoughtful or sympathetic regard or respect. Thoughtfulness for others. Okay, that is Webster, by the way. So, learning about what is valuable and learning about somebody, about each other, is consideration. Knowing what they value, knowing what they care about, knowing what they want, knowing their dreams, their hopes, their visions. And I would say that this is a lot of times for younger people, it's just a big one. Okay? For I work with young adults a lot. Consideration. If they don't see consideration, they're tuned out. They're tuned out. You go to work and there's hey, do your job, right? Just do your job. Don't talk to me. Just do your job, right? But millennials, on the other hand, are like, you need to consider me. I love what we're reading about. Millennials want to work from home now because, you can in a lot of jobs. And that's a big thing. That's a big thing that's rising up in the workforce. Imagine, working from home. That sounds awesome. And some jobs, obviously, you can't. But that's a big thing now. Like different things. Consider me. And in a relationship, if you don't feel considered ever, it gets bad, okay? You didn't think about me. You didn't think about what I was I cared about. And so this can easily, if this is ignored, if there is no consideration, it festers and it grows and it destroys a relationship from the inside. And consideration is actually, again, I work with young adults, but this applies for everybody, is why it's good to be honest in the beginning of a relationship. Because if you're not honest, you're going to have someone trying to learn values that are a lie. You don't even really value that, but they're trying to adapt because they care about you to your values, but your values aren't even your honest values. You see what I'm saying? Honesty is probably that's my go-to for any relationship, is like, you got to start with honesty. In fact, I feel like a lot of bad relationships would have been completely avoided altogether if somebody was just honest from the get-go. But anyways, when someone doesn't have consideration for us, there's a lot of times where it infuriates us, especially if it's someone that we're close to. If some random, hey, listen, you go to Target, Some of you know what I'm going to talk about in a minute. You go to Giant, right? And you're like, okay, lady, listen. Lady, look, there's not that many kinds of oatmeal, and you don't need to block the entire aisle. There's like 7 carts waiting to go through, and you're like having an epiphany about which kind of oatmeal you're trying to get. You know what I'm saying? You're not being considerate. I don't even know you. You know, this drives me nuts because I'm somebody I'm always watching. I'm like, I don't want to get in the way. And then there's other people that are just like, I don't care. You're like, boy, I'll tell you what, if I wasn't saved. Gonna pull some Elijah on you and call the fire down from heaven. But sick Marty on him. Giant. All right, so if someone is not considerate to others, again, they're not likely to be considerate of you. This is great, by the way, going into dating advice. Not that I need to, but some of you might be, interested in dating. If they're not considerate to other people, chances are, after, the honeymoon period of a couple months, they're not going to be considerate of you either, okay? Just saying, if somebody is just in general not considerate, well, anyways, I digress again. All right, so being considerate means being excited about what makes others excited, crying for what makes others cry, learning to cherish which they cherish. Boy, this sounds like a Bible verse. Learning to be together. And even sometimes we have to force it, to be honest. Sometimes it's like, listen, I don't really see why you're so sad about that. You barely knew that person. You didn't even like your job. But to be empathetic is something that we are called to be in the church with the body. Okay? Paul is adamant about this. He harps on it in multiple letters to the church, saying, cry with those who cry, weep with those who weep. Okay? Have joy with those who are joyful. And I think that's something that it's sometimes forgotten about inside the body, is to be that way. Hey, let's celebrate because they did something. They got a promotion that they've been working their butt off for 5 years, and they got it, and they're so excited, and they come to church, and they're like, guess what? And nobody cares. And they're like, dang, right? Man, have a party. Go take that person out to lunch, right? Oh, I'm sorry, I'm like preaching to you, Brenda, but I just, you're so bright. You get that yellow shirt, I just keep looking. It's hard. It's like this, but anyways, so this is what consideration is, and it's important to have within the body and as Christians. Not just to believers, but specifically to the body, but also unbelievers, to be considerate. I think that this is probably, now this is not a problem as much in some churches as others, but there is this, we're not considerate of unbelievers. We expect you to act saved, but you're not saved. Which, I don't want to get into the semantics of that, but that is so incredibly toxic and does not work. When you try to make somebody act saved who is not saved, boy, that doesn't work well, okay? That's like going to the restaurant and ordering a cheeseburger and they don't put the burger in. And you're like, well, see, this by definition is no longer a burger. That's not a burger anymore. You can have the lettuce and stuff, but that's not a burger now. And so we try to, sometimes try to act like they need to put, and not so much here. I don't think that's so much here, but in other churches, that has been a problem that was really rough and really turned a lot of people away from the church. Okay? So second word. So the first word was what? Consideration. We're going to get these tonight, all right? All right. I'm coming off of a little something too, by the way, if my voice sounds a little weird. I've been coming off of something for like a month. Daughter goes to preschool and brings stuff home with her. Anyways, so second word, consideration was first. Second word, candor. Some of us like this word a little too much, but some of us don't do this at all. So it's kind of a balancing thing, all right? Candor, the state or quality of being frank, open, and sincere in speech or expression. Okay? Candidness is another word for it. Being honest in relationships will save you from 90% of the problems in relationships. It just will. I had a guy who was a friend of mine at Christ for the Nations when I was there. And he was a little younger than me. And man, we would play games every night. Like a bunch of us would get together. I had five computers in my room the one night. Like we just brought them in and plugged them into places. It was hilarious. And we had this one Korean kid that was just screaming in Korean the whole time. It was so funny. But we were playing and we were having fun and we were like a group of guys. We were a crew. And we'd get more people in there and they'd be watching and they'd be talking. There was like 10, 15 people in my one room, where our dorm. And it was just fun. It was good times. Well, he met a girl. And I don't want to say that you don't have to sacrifice relationships, but he would not play with us anymore because he had to spend time with his girl. Okay, so they dated for I think a year and a half, and he proposed to her, and they ended up getting married in 2 years. But guess who never played games with us again? Because after he was married, he tried. But I was like, you can't set up an entire relationship by sacrificing something and then get married and be like, oh, guess what I like to do? You know what I mean? And so he could no longer, he'd be like, well, she doesn't really want me to play. She doesn't like when I play that game. And so it was like this big thing. I'm like, bro, you took something you like to do and you didn't do it for love, and then now you can't go back. I mean, you could go back, but it's just going to cause problems, right? Because not being honest. And now he stopped playing. He did that for his wife, but it was like you didn't have to. Like, and if she really didn't like that, I digress with that one too. But being honest will save you from 90% of the problems in relationships. And if you can't be any of these other three, at least have candor. The faking who you are is quite literally cancer in relationships. Okay? Pretending does not work. And I'll tell you what, I don't want to go down this rabbit trail too far, but we can lie to ourselves too. And when we keep lying to ourselves, it's the same thing. It doesn't work. It deteriorates everything. Being open and honest, we could all use that in our relationships. But one of the reasons why people aren't honest, and I would argue it's a little worse now than before, is people's skin has become increasingly thin. There is I don't want to get into this too far either, but there is a very prevalent, being offended and being a victim is noble, is something that people pay attention to. So there's a desire by some people to jump on that train and become that, and become offended because now people are catering to you because you're offended. Okay? And everybody has seen this. We all know what I'm talking about. And actually I don't want to jump on this soapbox, but just a little bit. When people fake being a victim, I'm just going to say it like this and then I'm done, okay? When people fake being a victim, it diminishes real victims. Okay? So that's all I'll say. I'm done with that. I'm not going to go into that. But it irks me a little bit when I know people who have been through things and then I see people who haven't been through things, but they act as though they have. Very, very, very bad. And especially if they're exposed as lying. Boy, that makes it even worse. Okay, so that's that. Giving truth to one another in a non-threatening way is important, though. Sometimes people mistake candor for the ability to just be rude. Okay, one of the things I always hear people, I just tell it like it is. Okay, but you didn't quite need to say it like that. You're stupid. You could have said you were a little ignorant in that situation. Maybe was a better word for it. You know what I mean? So one of the things I always say is like have candor, but be considerate, right? And have candor. It'll go a lot better. And one of the biggest reasons for this, probably the biggest reasons for this, is because you can't formulate trust to somebody who's not honest. You can't have trust. And if you're not honest and open, what happens is they grow inside of us. If we're not open about it, it irritates you, you don't talk about it. It happens again, it irritates you, you don't talk about it. You know the cycle. You've been there where it's just like you go, and you're like, I'm pretty sure leaving my bowl on the table was not that big a deal, but now it was. Or, and it can be you too, right? Where it's like, they said that, and it really wasn't that big a deal, but I have about a freight train of stuff behind it that I'm thinking about right now and feeling, and someone looked at me wrong, and now I'm jumping down their throat. And it's like, or you're sick, right? Like I'm sick, and I'm like, I have to be careful with my kids. Like, if I'm not feeling well, or I didn't get any sleep the night before, it's like, oh boy, I'm more irritable. In the 17th game of hide and seek in one day. Listen, you hide in 3 places. I can't pretend to not find you this long. All right. Anyways. So being fake, it can deteriorate trust in a relationship. And that's something that Jesus never, ever, ever did. Jesus was brutally honest in some ways. But he also did it with compassion and care. And the reason he was honest was because he loved. Okay? And I love watching Jesus talk to different people. That's probably my favorite part about the story of Christ. Like, the miracles are cool. The whole overarching story is fascinating. The entire salvation, the cross, the resurrection. All of it's beautiful. But watching the interactions that Christ took to you and me, to laymen, to everyday people, to people he shouldn't even been talking to. We just talked about the Good Samaritan 2 weeks ago at Young Adults. That story is fascinating. When you dive into it, you realize that the Samaritan was somebody that the Jews didn't like. Okay? Not to bash anybody or anything, but Jews were not known to be, how am I going to say this? Jews were not known to be not racist. Okay? That's the way we're going to say it, okay? They were very elitist. They were God's chosen people. They were the master race. They were Abraham's people. The Messiah was coming through them. And the Samaritans, not so much, okay? They did not like the Samaritans. And when you read that story of the Good Samaritan, everybody kind of knows the story where a priest comes along and doesn't do anything for the guy that got mugged. People come along, and then the Samaritan comes. And Jesus was saying, hey, look, this guy that you hate because of his where he's from. This guy was the one who was a neighbor. This guy was the one who was loving like Christ. This is the guy who loves God. And boy, that message, that spoke some truth. That spoke some candor. Okay? Because then they had to think about that. Because they were like, oof, can't be that person. That's not a hero. Why is he the hero of the story? And Jesus was getting at their hearts. I love that story. But anyways, the third C word. So we got 4. What was the first one? Second one. The third one, certitude. Certitude. All right? Freedom from doubt, especially in matters of faith or opinion. Certainty. Certitude. Okay? This could be defined as trust. In a relationship, trust is the single most important commodity you can have. Okay? Once trust is broken, things get difficult. When trust isn't there, this is one of the reasons why I actually think that the Bible is kind of indicates that cheating in a marriage is a way out. An affair is a way out of a marriage because it breaks the trust. Likely forever. Okay? I mean, I don't know what everybody here has been through. But you could be cheated on one time. And that breaks the trust in the current relationship, and it makes it difficult in future relationships. It can be 10 years, and you still have this lingering issue. Let's say he or she cheats on you, someone from work, every time they go to work. You know what I'm saying, right? And so trust is extremely important, and to have certitude, to have trust is so necessary for healthy relationships, okay? And to build it up is extremely difficult. It might be easy for some people to trust initially, or they think it is anyways, but once it's broken, it's very hard to get back. That's why it's important to never break it in the first place, if you can. I would argue that children actually are very aware of this. We like to think that children, they just kind of go with wherever the wind blows, right? But one of the biggest, I would argue, parenting mistakes that we make is breaking the trust of a child. Because once they don't trust you, everything becomes more difficult. It's one of the reasons why, and again, I'm not here to preach parenting issues. It's one of the reasons I don't stop at 2. And I don't do 2.5. I don't do 2 3/4. Wish my mom was here, I'd get her with this. I don't do 2.9, right? I do 1, 2, 3. And I'll tell you what, I haven't had to get to 3 in about 7 months with my daughter, who's 3. Because she knows I'm getting to 3. Because I'm consistent with that. And whatever I'm consistent in, oh man, it's so much easier. If I'm not consistent in something, everything becomes hard. It becomes a discussion. It becomes a conversation with a 3-year-old, which gets interesting. But, and this 3-year-old is deciding she's having lots of conversations now. And she started the what's that for? What's that for? What's that for? What's that for thing. Whoa, boy. But certitude or trust with her is so, it dictates the relationship in all places. And if she knows I will do something or won't do something, she's aware of it. And she knows if she can, I know he's going to do that. I know when it's time to take a nap, it's time to take a nap. It's futile to fight it. Okay? And it makes the whole relationship easier. I was reading a book by, I don't know if you guys know Jordan Peterson, but he wrote a book, 12 Rules for Life. Really cool book, but one of the rules for life was don't let your children do anything that will make you hate them. Okay? And this guy he's a clinical psychologist, professor at University of Toronto. He's been doing this for a long time. But one of the things he said is if you let your children do things that make you go up a wall, you will have such a difficult time having a relationship with that child. And it's better to discipline. And he talked about how for his kid he would always say, go sit on the stairs, and when you're ready to join us and act civilized, you can come back to the 5-year-old. All right? And he said, man, you never sit there for more than 2 minutes. Come back, be ready to socialize. And it's like, that's a great lesson because that's what society does. You be bad, you go sit somewhere and find out for a while, and then you can come join us when you've done your time, right? And that's kind of what he's talking about, but it works. But you have to be consistent, right? So certitude is really built up out of consistency and not breaking trust. But it's not automatic. It's necessary, but it's not automatic. And it might take years to develop it. I think sometimes people try to force it in a relationship very early on. I just trust you because you're pretty. Yeah, that's a good idea. Boy, you got muscles. I trust you already. Right? Okay. I met you last week. I trust you. So you see how this goes. But I think one of the things is you can overtrust or undertrust in situations, and both will cause problems. You need to be realist too, I think. And if you're too overly willing to just throw my trust to anybody, you're going to get broken. And you're probably going to get conned. And you're probably going to get used. If you just throw your trust to anybody. That's literally what con men do. They look for people that are likely to fall into a trap, to overtrust. I know you always hear about those phone calls. People are calling elderly people, trying to get them, tell them, oh, your money, you got to give us your information, and it gets bad. And they're looking for somebody to be gullible and fall into it. But then there's the other side where people don't trust anybody, and that's not really that great either. Because consistent skepticism about a partner will really make things difficult, or a friend, or even a coworker. If you're always not willing to trust them, it gets very hard to be. I don't know if anybody's been in a relationship like that before, but when somebody never trusts you, it's very difficult to have a relationship with that person. Okay, the last C. So we have consideration, candor, and certitude, okay? The last C word. Anybody want to take a guess at what the last C word? What's really important in a healthy relationship? She got it. Let's go. Communication. You knew that was coming. Communication. This one's pretty obvious for most of us who've ever been in any relationships. Communication is key, right? That's what some people always say. All right, communication is the imparting or interchange of thoughts, opinions, and information by speech, writing, or signs. Okay, communication is equal parts listening and speaking. Usually people tend to go one or the other. And it's very difficult to teach yourself to do both. It's very difficult to stop yourself from talking sometimes and listen. And really listen, not just listen to figure out what you're going to say and then say it, but to really listen. It's very difficult a lot of times, especially if you think you know. Because a lot of times people who are talking to us, friends might be confiding in you, and they're trying to tell you something that they're not saying. You understand what I'm saying? They're trying to tell you something a little deeper. They're trying to get to it. A child might be trying to tell you something more than what they're actually saying. I'm sad. Well, let's get to the bottom of that. Why? Well, you think it might be, they had a bad day at school, but it might be something that happened 2 years ago. You gotta listen. It's very hard to listen sometimes, and then sometimes it's hard for people to really communicate and speak. Those two get to be difficult. But when you're communicating, you want to try to make people feel justified in their emotions. Okay, this is something that's a little sketchy because it could be considered enabling in some cases. But you want to let people feel justified in the way they're feeling. Mostly because the way you feel is not even really regarding logic. Emotion is very uncontrollable. And if you feel a certain way, it's hard to be like, well, just stop feeling that way. I love people that stop being sad. Oh, okay. Well, if I just thought about that, I'd be fine. Just be happy. Oh, okay. I'm just going to go be happy right now. That doesn't work. Anybody ever try that? No. It doesn't work, right? You can't will yourself to just feel something. Oh, you just lost that relationship you've been in for 4 years and you were going to get married. And then, hey, stop worrying about it. It's fine. You just wasted, $15,000 on that person. But it's cool, just put on a happy face. Go to McDonald's. Sorry, Chick-fil-A, you're right. I shouldn't have said that. So one of the things I can give a little tidbit of information when it comes to listening and communicating. One of the ways we can do that is repeating what somebody said. It's a quick trick. It's just a quick one to do. When somebody is really confiding in you or talking to you, you repeat what they just said. This is a very, very simple but very effective communication strategy where you repeat what somebody says, and even if you parrot them exactly, they might tell you, no, that's not what I meant. Because now they heard their own words, and they're like, wait a second, that's not what I meant. And it's very interesting to see that happen, where you're like, but that's not what you meant, but that's what you said. So we're clearly not speaking what we mean, so let's work this out, okay? One of the easiest ways to get through that, Jesus does this too. He does it in a little different way, but he really kind of tries to get to the root of what's going on. Every single time he has a conversation, he knows where we're going here. And in fact, back to the Good Samaritan story, the guy's asking him, he's trying to get to if you read a story, at least in a pretty general understanding, the dude's trying to figure out how little love we can give to fulfill the law. He's trying to find the minimum, all right? He's like, who's my neighbor? Like, it's just next door, right? That's my neighbor. And then Jesus opens it up and says, no, the whole world. And the guy's like, well, that backfired. But generally, like, we're talking about this, Jesus is constantly dealing with people who are saying one thing, but he knows they're trying to get somewhere else. And sometimes they're trying to trap him, but other times they're genuinely trying to just understand from him because they believe in him. And it's amazing the way he interacts. But he's consistently working on communication with those people and being very effective at it. And we should, as Christians, be very careful of our communication. And I think that we need to listen more in general as a people, because everybody now is just... It's talk, it's type. I should say it's more type. Right now it's just type. Type anything, type everything. And nothing's personal anymore. There's no everything is impersonal. Just blast it out on the internet. I know some people love Twitter. Facebook is bad enough. I think Twitter was like even worse in my opinion. But Twitter is just crazy. It's just say random things out to everybody. And it's like, man, I don't even trust me to say, like, I'm up here and I'm like, okay, make sure I'm saying the right things. Make sure I'm, not, and it's like, just say whatever you want. Who cares if it hurts somebody or if it makes somebody upset or if it's factually right or wrong, whatever. Or I love I was factually right. It's like, yeah, but you didn't quite need to say it like that. But communication is extremely important in relationships. And I think that one of the things that I find too is the expectations for people to understand without being communicated to. You can't read minds, okay? We can in some ways if we put pieces together, but I think, and I'll get men a lot, but sometimes we got to go the other way a little bit, but we can't read minds. You know what I'm saying? And so not communicating is really tough to have a relationship with. And we need to be open and honest. This is back to candor again, okay? But we have these communication things in relationships. So we have consideration, candor, certitude, and communication, okay? The 4 C's to avoid minds in relationships. But real quick, I'm not going to go much longer, so we'll get out of here. Good time. But I want to talk about the antonyms of these, okay? The opposites of these, because the opposites of these, if these are the things to avoid minds, the opposite are things that you go and jump on the mind, okay, and destroy relationships. And it's good to think about these, okay? And you don't have to, this is just, I'm just going to go through them real quick. I'm not going to go through them long like that. But the first one, so if consideration is the first one, disregard would be the antonym, okay? Disregard for anybody or anything or anyone's feelings or emotions. I do what I want. I'm the man of the house. I'm a strong, independent woman. I'm this, I'm that. I don't care what, I'll show up when I want to show up. And it's like, that's how you blow relationships to smithereens. That's number one. The second one, candor. If candor is basically being honest, deceit would be number 2's antonym, okay? Deceit, lying, cheating, deceiving, all of that. I mean, we know it destroys relationships. But in relationships where you think you can get away with something, you see what happens. Because when you get caught, then all of it comes unraveling. Number 3, certitude is the word that we had, which is certainty and trust. Distrust would be the simple word. These all happen to be D's, by the way. So I didn't have a D one for the last one. I found a D one for the last one, but it wasn't the quite one I wanted. But and the last one is communication, and I have withholding. Okay, withholding from one another. I guess you could say like deterring or something like that if you want to really make them all D's. But withholding, retracting from a relationship, how you feel or plugging into how someone else feels. Okay? These are the ways you go into a relationship and destroy it completely. And there's a common theme amongst all of these that I want to bring up now, and then we'll close, okay? Consideration, candor, certitude, and communication effectively, all of them have to do with being selfless. All of them have to do with surrender, laying down yourself for the good of the relationship, the good of one another. All the antonyms, the disregard, the deceit, the distrust, and withholding, they're all selfish. Okay? The 4 C's in a relationship, they're all selfless. Okay? Because you value the relationship more than the individual, yourself, right? You value the relationship with a child, with an adult, with a child that's moved out, with your coworkers, with your friends, right? You say, listen, I care more about having a relationship than being right all the time, right? I care more about the relationship that I will tell you the stuff I don't really want to say because we need to work through this, right? I don't want to talk about that, but I need to talk about that so our relationship can have trust, right? And these things, they all revolve around selflessness. And the selfishness, I found it so fascinating. The minefield could be M-I-N-E, mine, me, selfish. Every time you run into one of those, boom. That's when the relationship, when you start thinking mine, me, I want it my way. No, it's Burger King. But right, I want it this way, or it's that way. I want to do. You run it, you're selfish, it's mine, boom. Every mine you run into in a relationship is usually a result of selfishness, of a mine attitude. Okay? And Christ was as far opposite as you could be. Because we all know, John 3:16, the motivation behind Christ is the world. Right? Christ, the whole reason Christ came, the whole reason he worked with people, the whole reason he set this whole thing up, the whole reason he suffered, the whole reason he did all of it was for the relationship he had with mankind, because he loved the world. His motivation was love of the world, not like that, but he loved us, the individual, the relationship, that he was willing to be selfless in all things. He was willing to be considerate, kind, compassionate. He was willing to have candor at times and have a consistency in the relationship that was always something to have faith in. He didn't change. He didn't flip the script on people all the time and be like, well, now I changed my mind. Now I'm this. He didn't do that. And he was communicating. He kept trying to communicate. He got a little frustrated a few times, and he's like, come on, like I just told you this like 4 times. But he was always communicating. And then the people he was with, you could see that they were real people. I love the Bible. Like the Bible is one of the most fascinating books because it shows people being people. They were not saints. Peter got yelled at by his teacher, and they put it in the Bible. They said, hey, let's add this. And there was a good chance that he was running around doing all this stuff when this stuff was getting written down. He could have been like, hey, don't do that. But I find it fascinating because I really think that a lot of the New Testament people that we really see, Paul, James, and Peter, they were like, look at us, look at our flaws, look at our shortcomings. Because as we talked about, I think it was with Ron, in your weakness, God's love and God's work is made whole in us. So it's not that we don't boast in ourselves, but we boast in Christ. But Jesus' whole method of relationship, again, it was born out of a selfless love for mankind. And as Christians, which means Christ-like, that means we should be looking like Christ to others. And I always say this: if you want, people always ask me like, what's something that you really just take away? Like, what's a big thing of Christianity that you take away? It's that Christian means Christ-like. Forget everything else for a minute. Forget the law. Forget the whole Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus. Forget everything for a minute, okay? If you're just starting as a Christian, or you're kind of like, I grew up in church. I heard some Sunday school stories. There was a boat and some animals. And there was a giant one time, right? If that's, hey, okay. But go to Christ. And don't just read for, I just want to blast through the story. Look at how he interacts with people. It's fascinating. And it's beautiful. And it really shows us a whole different version because, if you study what they were looking for, they weren't looking for what he was. They were waiting for a Messiah. They were waiting for a Savior. They were waiting for somebody to come down and beat up Rome, if you really want to be honest about it. Rome was the current oppressor of the Jews, and they were like, the Messiah needs to come on a horse and come kill some Romans. Come slaughter them. Because that's our enemy. And Christ said, I'm going to go fight a better, bigger, stronger enemy than Rome. I'm going to fight the enemy that's oppressed you for all time. Not the enemy that's just currently occupying you. You see what I'm saying? As I think people, I think it's a little lost if you're not really reading the New Testament, but I find it fascinating. Jesus is all about this. And he's like, listen, I care more about you than to just fight your little battles here. I want to fight the big battle for you. I want to take out your biggest opponents, and you guys can deal with these other ones. All right? So that's all I have for tonight. I'm going to close in prayer and we can get out of here. But I want you to think about your relationships that you're currently in. I know I am. The most important relationships are the ones you want to think about first. And you could branch out from there. But if you think, hey, I haven't been really good in the consideration department very much lately. It's something you might want to consider. Or, the candor thing, it got me. I've been kind of not saying things and just letting them build up and get angry. Or, the trust thing is it's the certitude. I'm not really trusting in the relationship, and we need to talk about that. Or the communication in general, just not being good. I'm not listening enough. I feel like that's every relationship ever. I'm not listening enough. I could listen better. Or I need to speak. Because again, there is that. Think about those things, and as you go on, work on one of them. Pick one of them. Don't try to work on all of them at the same time, but pick one of them. And I'm going to try to get better at this. If I just get a little better at this, it might improve my relationship. Some of us have relationships that have deteriorated over time or have suddenly taken a hit recently or whatever. I need to work on those, okay? So I'm going to pray, and then we're going to head out of here, all right? So God, I thank you for this church. I thank you for Sunshine Ministry, by the way. Thank you, guys. Thank you for them coming, and I thank you for the body of believers here. I pray that as we move forward and go out tonight and leave and head home, that we remember relationships with one another, the body, the church. One of the most important relationships that you really gave us was the body of church, the family of church. And I pray that as we move forward in this new year, that we build relationships within this church here at Word of Grace, strong relationships built on selfless love for one another, deeper relationships, more meaningful relationships, more quality time with one another, more organization with one another, more empathy for one another, more compassion with one another. I pray that the church body, as we move forward this year, really gets unified, gets united, gets glued together in a deeper state than ever before. Even if people live a half an hour away from one another, they still find a way to get together. The people who have said, we wish we would go out to lunch with them, that they do it and they move forward with it. I pray that as we leave tonight, we keep in mind the Holy Spirit and all that you've done in our lives, all you've done in this body, all you continue to do, and we put you first in our lives. In Jesus' name we pray.